Welcome to the PROCON podcast, hosted by Paul Vogels, with expert guest interviews, case study reviews, and insightful discussion topics. The PROCON podcast leads the project controls conversation.
So, welcome back, listeners, guys and girls from the project controls department. Welcome back to the next episode of this PROCON podcast. As you might can see, it's getting dark here in the Netherlands. I have a very special guest, Leighton, who is CEO of LoadSpring, managed hosting company. We're going to talk about that later. But thanks a lot for sticking to us. As you all know, PROCON podcast is leading the project controls conversation, talking about use cases, talking about software specials, and talking about educational tracks. And today, very special guest, Leighton. Eric, thank you for joining me on the show.
Thanks, Paul. Nice to be here.
Yes. All the way up to California. We pre-discussed that the weather is challenging, COVID is challenging. It's getting dark here. You're just waking up. But with this technology, we can talk to each other crystal clear. Eric, you are the CEO of LoadSpring now. You're the founder of LoadSpring, if I'm correct. But you started with a mechanical engineering degree. Can you tell me a little bit how you come up with this really cool job as a mechanical engineer and now end up with also a really cool job as the CEO of LoadSpring? Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, well, it's been an interesting journey. Professionally, I've only worked for 3 companies my entire life, most of it LoadSpring, and really had a passion for engineering. I've got my master's in fatigue and fracture mechanics, so I fundamentally was studying how planes crash through fatigue and fracture. In the early 90s, the job market wasn't so great in the United States. I ended up taking a job with a company called Parametric Technology, who hired mechanical engineers right out of college, and really was my first exposure to a very important part of my career, which was customer support. And I worked all with mechanical engineers. Parametric Technology made might have heard of it, a very high-end 3D solid modeling package called ProEngineer. But I really learned how to start interfacing with customers and making customers happy and finding that interaction between how support and the software really affected sales, right? So the salespeople needed support to get it right and solve customer issues so that they could sell more software. So that first job was kind of critical in my transition towards software and IT. And it kind of makes sense because we're all mechanical engineers. We were supporting mechanical engineer software. We were dealing with mechanical engineers on those support cases. And then transitioned up a level to a private company that built Windows NT and servers for ProEngineer. Okay. And so Windows NT was brand new. This software was typically run on Unix systems. Now it could be run on smaller PCs. And we built our knowledge of ProEngineer allowed us to really tweak the IT infrastructure of these servers and these PCs to run this software as good as possible. And after a few years there, again, this now put me in a position where I was really starting to understand quality and performance of software, as well as helping on the sales side and closing deals. So now I've got the support experience with customers. I've got the sales experience and the quality and performance that customers demand. Then we decided, a few of us decided to start what became LoadSpring. And the idea was to host that software, ProEngineer, on the internet so that people didn't have to fly from one place to another to do design reviews. And the idea was that hosting that application would allow people to interact with 3D solid models on the internet. Unfortunately, the idea was a little ahead of its time. The internet wasn't fast enough. And we got a call from one of our partners right after we started LoadSpring, said, "Hey, have you guys ever heard of this product called Expedition?" We said no, but what's it all about? And he said, well, it's a contract management app. And I know you guys have a data center and you're doing something with hosting applications. We'd really like you to take a look at it. And we said, well, who's the customer? And the customer was Pfizer Pharmaceutical. We said, oh yeah, we can host that.
Yeah, it's a big name right now, but it was back then also.
Yeah, we shifted from a focus on a CAD application to a focus on project management applications, with our first customer being Pfizer. And we really never looked back from that point forward. So now we're focused. We host over 150 different applications in the project management space, and ultimately, what makes this space quite unique is these applications are very complicated, very database driven, require a lot of performance focus, and they require a lot of support. And we just found that was a really special space for us, because we were good at solving complex challenges in the IT space.
So if, in resume, LoadSpring is hosted by accident because a partner said, can you host me Expedition? And now you are hosting more than 150 project management application. Is it not by accident, but by an opportunity you took in with the knowledge from the 3D and the I've been working with Windows NT with the performance, more back-end performance optimization. Is that was the hosting of Expedition the first step into running 150 applications in the cloud right now?
Yeah, and ultimately, we really saw this as small to medium-sized businesses that couldn't afford the IT infrastructure and the IT sophistication. The reality became that these large enterprise organizations around the world really they're very risk averse, right? When you look at a Pfizer who's building research facilities, or you're looking at the London Olympic Committee, which is under deadlines to build these stadiums for the 2012 Olympics, or Apple headquarters. These projects are all risk averse. The people running the projects, they don't want any risks. So knowing that they are not IT organizations, what we found was these organizations would rely on LoadSpring to provide that risk-averse IT environment that was always there 24/7. And if there was an IT problem, we'd have their back, right? So we really became these risk mitigators when it came to IT infrastructure. And it's where our strength is today. Yep. With a ton of options, from managing these applications yourself, using a hyperscale provider like an AWS or an Azure. At the end of the day, that still doesn't bring risk mitigation, right? You still need human beings to manage the IT infrastructure, manage the technology changes that are occurring on really a weekly or a monthly basis, all to make sure the project stays up and running, and these businesses have access to their information.
Yeah, it's what we say in the PROCON podcast. It's about people, processes, and tools. The tools you use are the same probably that the IT department, but it's your people, it's your process to do this on a project basis, because that's what I'm looking for. If you look on your website, LoadSpring is obsessed. That's literally from your website on project management solutions. Why the project management solutions? Is it because the IT wants to mitigate those risks, because the financial IT is run on a day-to-day business and projects are unique by its kind? Or why is the niche market on project management so big at LoadSpring?
There are several reasons for that. One is, I really love the space. I look at the companies that we work with, and arguably this industry, this project management industry is, gets a bad rap. they typically are told they're 5 to 10 years behind in technology, right? They're doing things with spreadsheets today, right? And I take a little bit of offense to that, because these are smart companies that build a lot of stuff around the world. They're building our highways, they're building our bridges, they're building our tube stations and our highways. And at the end of the day, my job is to provide vision for these organizations so that they can bring their projects into the future in an efficient way, in a cost-effective way. And I don't think a lot of people know this, but most of the companies that we deal with are, they're engineering and construction companies, sometimes pure construction, sometimes pure engineering, a lot of manufacturing, a lot of telecom and power. These companies are not necessarily making a ton of profit, right? So their challenges is these projects have to finish on time and on budget. And they're not IT organizations, and they struggle with that. So our job is to listen to the customer, understand their business challenges, what their business objectives are, and then make sure that we're providing access to the right applications, the right integrations, the right analytics, the right consulting, the right partners, like the work that we're doing with you guys at Primaned, really providing that complete solution so that their projects are successful. But it starts with understanding their business objectives, right? And that's what makes LoadSpring very different. We're not out there just putting a commodity checkbox of hosting. We're actually trying to understand how the business wants to run, and then providing a solution that fits with their business.
Yeah, well, that's the listening. That's the customer-facing profiles you have all around the world with partners like Primaned, but also with your sales team and your consulting team. You are actually listening to understand, not listening to respond to it, but listening to understand. And that's, for example, if you read your website, you're doing cloud assessments. What are your needs? What are your visions? Is that what makes you unique from, for example, an Oracle or an IBM or an SAP who says, well, there's one size fits all policy?
Well, look, everybody's talking about digital transformation right now. And at the end of the day, if you don't have a good understanding of your own IT infrastructure, how can you transform? How can you transform from nothing to something, right? So our job, and particularly in reference to, doing an evaluation of where a business is in their cloud strategy, what we find is many customers think that they have a cloud strategy, when in fact, really what they have is that they're cloud aware. And they want to develop a cloud strategy. And so we come in and we take a look at how they make decisions, how their organization works, who's in charge, are the project people making decisions around IT, or IT people making decisions around projects? It's different for every organization. And with our experience, we take a look at where different levels of sophistication exist. We can identify that and help a business go from a cloud-aware strategy really to an enterprise cloud strategy that's a hybrid approach, right? Not one-size-fits-all approach like an Oracle or even an AWS kind of approach. Because at the end of the day, customers want to run the applications that they feel provide the right metrics, the right analytics, the right process for their business. And they don't really care where it comes from. It could be hosted by themselves. It could be hosted by the company, the software company itself. So you have to really have a hybrid approach to how customers want to be successful.
And in this hybrid approach, I think one of the advantages you can offer as LoadSpring that within those 150, and I know from a fact that if there's number 151, you will take a look at it to incorporate into your portfolio. Does this give you an advantage to, for example, if I always make the metaphor, if I go into an Audi dealer or Mercedes dealer, I know which brand they are going to sell me. If I go to LoadSpring, for example, I can pick 150 brands which suit me more on a, well, let's say functional level than on a brand or on a product level. How is that giving you this advantage in, for example, if you go to an Oracle or to a PM Web or whatever solution you might think of, they only can offer what they have. And you can offer them, well, whatever it's in the 150 or 151. How is this advantage helping your customers?
Yeah, it's a really good point, Paul. And ultimately, how we have always looked at this space is to really help businesses understand what works and what doesn't work, right? So, for example, we manage probably 15 different estimating applications. And what's interesting about the estimating space is estimating software tends to lean more towards different types of industries, right? So there's estimating software for telecom projects, and there's estimating software for oil and gas, right? They're very within the project management space. Estimating is interesting because there's estimating software that's very specific to different spaces within that. And so what we've discovered over the last 20 years is our knowledge of that, how these applications work for very specific industries within the project space. That knowledge helps us really act more like a Sherpa to guide a business to make good decisions, right? So a company may start, for example, with us with a scheduling app like P6. Yep. Most people are running Oracle Primavera P6. It's a pretty standard app. And now they want to start moving into geospatial, and they want to start working with us on estimating and contract management. And the list goes on and on. And they're not sure which applications that they're going to use. So they could come to LoadSpring and we can give them advice on which applications run well in the cloud, which ones don't run well in the cloud, which ones are a challenge. And we also can give them access to those applications instantaneously. So for example, if an IT organization is working with their project team on selecting between 3 different estimating apps, well, look at the load on the IT staff to figure out how to host those things, how to get them installed, how to patch them, how to secure them. I mean, it's complicated, right? Just making the decision on which application to use. They can come to LoadSpring and we're already managing it. We already have experience with it. We already understand how to set it up and configure it. And by the way, we can give you access to it instantly in a demo environment for 30 days. Yep. Now they can start making much better decisions on which applications their business that are right for their business.
And that's your changing role from for delivering iron and hardware in the cloud to this Sherpa to say, okay, application A does this, runs well in the cloud. Challenge B runs well in the cloud, but you need to think about X, Y, and Z. So you're transforming more into an advisory organization and into a, well, let's call it simple, managed hosting organization. Is that something on your roadmap to broaden the portfolio of LoadSpring, or is that an additional service where you say, okay, I'm not just hosting it, I'm helping you selecting this?
No, that's exactly right. And that's really the vision of the company is, years ago, one of our largest companies, Black & Veatch, in Kansas, we're working with them on really expanding throughout their enterprise. We're quite a large organization, over 25,000 employees. Today we manage 22, 23 different applications for them. And they, obviously have a huge IT organization within the organization. And they said to me once, what we like about LoadSpring is their consultative approach to building a solution, right? It's not simply, this is what we offer. Here's how much it costs. take it or leave it, right? It's really a consultative approach. We have to understand your business, your objectives, what works and what your strategy is, so we can build that solution. And really the future, where this is kind of going for LoadSpring is around data, right? As we look to the future, the challenges we see for particularly, anyone running big projects in any industry, but particularly in the AEC industry, is access to data and really managing that information, right? So our tagline is connecting businesses to information. And when you look at that problem, I think a lot of companies, when they're making a decision around, a particular application, and let's stay with the estimating theme, right? I'm trying to figure out which one of 4 estimating apps my company's going to use. One of the things that they're not looking at is the underlying data. And how am I going to use that data? Is it in a SQL database? Is it in an Oracle database? Is it an Access database? Is there no database? Is it a SaaS product? Is it a hosted product? Is it an on-prem product? There's all these different solutions and with each different application, and they're forgetting the basic understanding of having access to that underlying data so that they can use it in their analytics. There's a lot of companies out there that might have a SaaS product and you can't access the underlying data.
Nope.
You can't integrate it with it. You can't API to it. You can't web services to it. They don't let you have access to that data. Maybe a great application, right? Might do all of the features that you want it to do. But if you don't have access to the underlying data, then it's useless to you, right? So we help companies really understand that component of their application selection and their application management. How easy is it to get to the data? What happens if you decide 2-3 years from now to stop using that application? Can you still get the data? Data is becoming paramount in our world and in the project world, so that companies can start using that information to make better decisions, to increase profitability and to increase revenue.
Data is the new gold. Some people say in project management or in different areas as well.
Exactly.
Common data environments are a very hot topic at the moment, and connecting what we like to call is the integral approach to this. If a schedule changes, what does it do to my cost? If a P&ID changes, what does it do to my work order system, etc. Is this something you see overlooked by the buttons and the futures the software vendors are presenting, that people aren't looking under the hood, let's say, for this data?
They're definitely not looking under the hood. And, we in 2021, last year already.
It seems so far away.
Seems so far away, and we want it to be far away.
Yeah.
But we embarked on a product we call Project Intel, where we're taking a look at that underlying data. And really, I could talk for hours on data, particularly for our particular types of customers who are struggling with this, struggling with analytics. They're struggling creating S-curves, right? Every single customer we talk to is still exporting data to a spreadsheet and from multiple applications and multiple divisions within the organization, stitching all that data back together for cost and schedule, and creating S-curves, right? Very manual process, very archaic process. But what they're not doing is looking at the underlying data, and it's creating a lot of challenges for them, particularly on the analytics side. So what we're doing is we're really going into the application data. We're extracting it, we're cleaning it, and then we're valving it. I call it valving it into a lake to answer questions that customers want to have answered. And what we're finding is that only about 25% of the data that's being produced within these applications is actually consumable from an analytics standpoint, 25%. So that means that if I've got 6 to 8 applications managing a project across, multiple divisions within my organization, that 1 in 4 pieces of data are actually usable.
Yeah.
And so if I'm trying to do analytics on data that's only 1 in 4, my analytics are going to be garbage. Yep. So we're helping organizations see that, identify where the process gaps are. And typically, by the way, those process gaps exist between applications. So you have a group of people running P6. You have a different group of people running the estimating software. You have a different group of people running the costing software. You have a different group of people running the contract software. Those different organizations running the different software packages aren't in sync. They're not even calling the projects the same names.
Nope.
Right. So when you try to bring that data together to analyze it, it's a nightmare. So we think that's going to really be the next vision and future of LoadSpring, is helping organizations really connect their business processes between applications, between divisions, into consumable, analyzable data.
Yep. Actionable data. Because if you say 1 in 4 is used, 3 and 4 is not used, so you don't understand or you don't know if they're right or wrong. It's like having a conversation with I don't know if you speak Chinese, but having a conversation with a Chinese guy who's saying 1 in 4 words in English and the other 3 in Chinese. Well, that's not going to end up in a good conversation, probably.
Exactly right.
On going further on that, I know a lot of software vendors are going with this common data environment strategy, with this one version of the truth strategy, moving more and more into SaaS solutions where they say, well, you can run everything from the cloud from one vendor, at least from one software developer, going more into annual recurring revenue models, where you don't invest in capital expenditures in hardware or in software, but going more into a OpEx kind of strategy. Is this still something LoadSpring can work? Can you combine, let's say, a real SaaS solution with a on-prem managed hosting solution to combine these data? Is that also something where in your new business model you can plug into?
Yeah. And again, like we talked about earlier, you really have to have a hybrid approach to the cloud, right? And, organizations are selecting SaaS applications, for example, as well as on-prem applications, as well as, maybe custom applications they've written in-house.
Yep. And
they want all of that application data to feed into a single source of truth that they can analyze. And so our Project Intel product is designed that way, so that we can, assuming that the SaaS application allows it, we can bring that information from anywhere on the internet in a secure way into the customer's data lake, and then they can perform the analytics on top of that. So we think that's a key part of the strategy. Again, if you think about it, every software company on the planet wants to move to a SaaS model, right?
Yep.
They want that ARR type of approach. Businesses like a Black & Veatch or Burns & Mac or Bam Nuttall, in the UK, these companies, they're running 10,000 software applications. They're not going to build 8 or 10,000 SaaS relationships. They can't manage that. So at the end of the day, many of these software companies that want to become a SaaS company are struggling to do that. So one of the additional things that we're doing and part of our strategy going forward is talking to these software companies and saying, hey, rather than building your own SaaS product, why don't you let us be your SaaS enabler, right? Now we can bring that project software into a project space.
Yep.
And now companies can have the best of both worlds. And we do think that's key to how organizations want to operate, and making sure that they have access to their software packages, whether it's SaaS enabled, as you said, hosted on-prem, hosted with LoadSpring.
That shouldn't be the deal breaker. The deployment model shouldn't be the deal breaker on the functionality, on the data, on whatever there is available to the market. That shouldn't be the decision maker or the deal breaker on doing this cloud strategy. And how to integrate different data within each other.
No, that's exactly right.
In this whole idea of being a Sherpa, where you're guiding people on data integrations and project intelligence, valving, I really like the term valving project data into, let's say, a common data environment or a data lake. Are you making the foundations for example, artificial intelligence? Because I see more and more organizations saying, I need analytics, which I don't need to program myself, but I really need anticipating software. Is this in your vision, in your roadmap as well to look into this?
Yeah, that's a great point, Paul. And ultimately, that's where we want to get these organizations, right? Remember, I mentioned, I think the project space in general gets a bad rap, right? They're 5 to 10 years behind in the IT world. And I really see LoadSpring as a company that's gonna help them get beyond that. And artificial intelligence is something that everybody's talking about. Now, when we start looking at the data, the underlying data for these customers, and we see, accuracy rates of 25%, there's no way they're going to get to AI that way, right? So our data scientists tell us that we need to get upwards of 92 to 95% accurate information and complete information from all project data sources in order for AI to actually start being something to consider. So companies we talk to throughout the world, everything they bring to us is, I want to get to AI. I want to understand AI. I want to implement AI in my projects. And we look at their data and say, well, you can't even do a proper S-curve on your data yet. So you can't get to AI. So it's really one of the most critical parts of our Project Intel platform is to get data into a unified state, into an independent database. Don't have to integrate. Everything's in a common database. Get the accuracy of identify where the 75% is missing, fix that.
Yep.
And once we get above 95% complete information, now we can start proposing AI solutions for these companies. And we think that journey is really a 12 to 18 month journey from starting with us, extracting, cleaning, then rebuilding their databases, identifying workflow processes, differences between different applications and the users, and differences between the different business units, unifying those. That journey is going to be about 12 to 18 months. If we do that, that's pretty quick. So to go into a company today and say, in 18 months, we're going to get you to AI, that's pretty impressive, because a lot of these companies have been trying to get to AI for the last 2 or 3 years, and they're not making any progress. So we really think it's important to define a roadmap for these organizations and a timeline for these organizations. Start with us. We're going to identify the data, and 12 to 18 months, we think that we can get your data in a point where you can start analyzing it accurately, and then starting to apply AI routines. And it starts telling you stuff about the data that you didn't even know.
Yeah. If you look at that, there are some really big interviews and big researchers on, for example, the construction and engineering industry. They are one of the least digitized organizations. Are you saying that there are companies who are ahead of this and within 18 months or close to 18 months move from this 1 to 4 into, well, almost 9 out of 10 data accuracy?
Yeah. And, to be honest, I don't see any organization out there of any size that is doing this well right now. And so this is the crux of the issue. It's industry wide, from huge, like I said, 20, 25,000 person organizations, yep, down to small, 200, 300 person organizations. So it's a very consistent challenge with every company that we see. And in order to get this entire industry to the next level, I take responsibility for that. Like I said, I really, really think these companies, they know where they want to be. We just have to help them get there, yeah, and help them get to the results that they want.
Yeah, but they see this a point at the horizon. They see the top of Mount Everest. They only need a Sherpa to guide them to there. They only see the end point, but you need to see the road.
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's it.
Okay, and in this challenging world, because I think the projects are getting more and more complex, multi-million projects are, well, no exception anymore. Different countries, different contractors, different contract forms. Isn't it getting too complicated for us to work, or do you sincerely believe that with the right approach, with the right Sherpa, with the right people, processes, and tools in place, we are overcomplicating it? It's more easy than we all think about.
Well, that's an interesting point, Paul. And I think, I would be silly to say we can do it all, right? That we're the magic bullet. And, yeah, part of our podcast today and part of our relationship with Primaned is understanding that, right? You guys bring an expertise to the application that we don't have. And so we also feel responsible to connect these dots for organizations to provide a complete solution for them, and understanding that we're just part of that. We're just one component of that, which is, we're going to handle the IT infrastructure, check that box, right? We're going to handle security, check that box. Performance, we're going to check that box. We're going to move into helping them better manage their data, check that box, right? But we're not the experts on actually implementing these applications. Mm-hmm. What's going to happen if they have to build better process? We're not going to help them build better process. We're going to partner with companies like Primaned that are going to help them do that, right? And same on the analytics side and the AI side. We're partnering with Google on the AI side to help us develop AI capabilities and machine learning capabilities for our customers. We're not experts in that. We know that, right? So, my job as the visionary of LoadSpring and really trying to see the future for these project companies is to meet them where they want to be, right? And I know where they want to be. I know what I can do to help them get there. And a big part of our strategy is bringing the tools with great companies beyond just LoadSpring to provide that total solution for these organizations to meet them where they want to be in the future.
Yeah, and we've mentioned this in the introduction. You can talk 24 hours on data, and we probably can spend 3 days on project controls and all kind of IT stuff. I always try to ask this question, and I know predictions are very hard, especially we learned the last couple of months and years. Where is LoadSpring in 3 years? What kind of services are there, or what kind of enabler is LoadSpring in 3 years?
Great question, and ultimately where I expect us to be is a company that can provide intelligence to the project in a way that allows businesses to be more efficient at running those projects. And what I mean by that is, at the end of the day, every business on the planet is kind of doing the same thing, right? They're taking human beings and they're building stuff. They might be building a bridge. They might be building a pipeline or a telecom line or managing a nuclear power facility. It's a bunch of humans working with a bunch of other humans to build and make stuff. And at the end of the day, I think there's a better way to do that. I think where LoadSpring fits in is being able to help a business look at their process, bring our experience to the table and help them run those projects more efficiently. Whether that means, winning more bids and generating more revenue, or, being more accurate in their schedule and their cost management so that they make more profit, and be able to provide them with the intelligence to make better decisions at the beginning of a project so that the end of the project ends where they expect it to be. Yep. And that I really see us as being critical to that success in the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, well, I think a really good closing remark, if I can call that. Well, we talked about it, so we can talk about this for years or hours or days, etc. Thank you very much, Eric, for contributing to the podcast. I think the PROCON podcast is leading the project controls conversation, and we really try to enable people, processes, and tools. Really keen to learn that you're moving from a tool to also a people and process oriented organization or enabler, where you're not just delivering computers in the cloud, but doing more than that. Now, being the Sherpa in the project controls environments. Thank you very much for that, Eric. Thank you very much, viewers and listeners, to tune in again. PROCON podcast, subscribe there. Listen to your podcast on Apple, Google, Spotify. Everything is in the cloud, also in the podcasting industry. Listen to that. If you want to contribute, we're more than open to receive guests all over the world, from the West, from the US to Australia or Asia or Middle East. Everybody is more than welcome on the show to talk about our really cool profession. Thanks again, Eric Leighton, CEO, LoadSpring Inc.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks for listening to the PROCON podcast. To listen and watch more episodes, you can subscribe and access the resources mentioned in this episode by visiting proconpodcast.com. We look forward to seeing you on our next episode, where we will continue to lead the project controls conversation. The PROCON podcast and the associated resources is published under copyright to Primaned. All rights reserved, no reproduction of this content is permitted.